Would help if I had muted myself there, huh?
Yeah, it would. Whoopsie.
Oh, goodness gracious. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Homewrecker Podcast. Should I just leave this music going for this entire episode?
No.
This creepy background music.
The dark, ominous tones.
I am the Golden Greek Alex Arion, joined as always by my beautiful, lovely, gorgeous wife, Monique. Monique, how are you?
Hi, you know what? I'm good because I'm breathing. I'm vertical. We've all got our health. Things are good. And you, my love?
Well, I'm fantastic as always.
Yeah, you are.
Thanks for asking. Before we get into today's topic and what we're going to talk about today, which I think is going to be kind of fun, I have a public service announcement for everybody that's listening. Especially when this episode airs and comes out, it might be close to Black Friday. The holiday season is coming upon us, and some people might be out looking for new things, new goodies, new TVs.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to let everybody listening know that if you or someone you know or love or care about is in the market for a new TV, don't buy a TCL TV.
Stay away.
Do not buy.
Mm-mm.
Stay away, no matter how enticing it may seem.
Unless you want to spend money for something that won't work.
No matter how cheap the price may be, how good a buy or how good a deal it may look like and appear to be.
Unless you have FU money and you just don't care what you waste it on.
Don't buy a TCL TV. Terrible.
Learn from us.
Terrible. Terrible mistake we made. All right. We don't need to go into any details because I'll just get really mad and angry and upset.
I will explain. We bought a TCL. And we don't really even watch TV. That's the best part. We barely watch TV. And we've had it for less than 2 years. And it just stopped working. I think it's the backlighting LEDs went out.
Backlight LED lights.
Which apparently is very common. It happens a lot with their TVs. And some people will have the TV less than a year. Some people have it a lot of people right after the warranty went out, I read, were complaining that it went out. It tends to vary, but it is a highly known issue on these TVs. So it's not easy to replace the backlights. And don't waste your time. Don't waste your money. Get something else.
Go with like a better known brand. Although that is a pretty well-known brand now because they partnered up. They have the Roku platform that's preloaded on there, which is why
only reason we got it.
Which is why we
because it
got
had the
it.
Roku.
So, but yeah, anyway, learn from us. Don't buy TCL. Doesn't matter the size. Just stay away from the brand. It's junk. Anyway, anything else you want to talk about? Plug? You want to get your plugs out of the way before we get into today's topic?
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, it's getting into the holiday shopping season as this episode airs. And if you are looking for a unique, different one-of-a-kind gift, go to tarotbymonique.com and place an order. I have orgonite. I have handmade beeswax candles, which burn the cleanest, cleaner than anything else. And everything I make is handmade with love and positive energy. And there's something out there for everybody. Take a look, see what feels right. If it's a gift, see what feels right for them. Place an order, and I hand write letters. If it's a gift, let me know. I'll write it out to the person it's going to. There's lovely packaging. I put a lot of care into it. It's worth the money. So go to tarotbymonique.com and see what I have to offer. And if you're interested in hypnotherapy, go to innerstandingshypnosis.com and schedule a free 20-minute consult.
There you go.
And there it is.
Awesome. This week, this is a name that might be familiar to some people because he's been apparently he's been the subject of some television shows, right?
Yep.
So why don't we go ahead and get into it, my lady? Why don't you tell us about Doc Benton.
The Legend of Doc Benton is an interesting one with many variations. The basic story is that a young boy, Thomas Benton, grew up in a small town in New Hampshire near Hanover. He went to medical school in Germany, came back to New Hampshire and became a doctor, helping those in his community until he became reclusive and retreated into the woods of Mount Moosilauke. The story claims that Doc Benton was responsible for taking and killing children, loggers, and hikers. Some victims were found with a small white pinprick behind their ear. There is also legend that Doc Benton discovered a way to become immortal, and he takes his victims to keep himself alive. It's difficult to determine what is fact and what is legend, as there are so many variations. Some say Doc Benton was born as early as the mid-1700s, while others claim late 1800s. Some tales claim he was born in poverty, while others say he was from a prominent family. Even Dartmouth College students have shared stories about Doc Benton encounters, since the prestigious school is housed walking distance to Doc Benton's alleged haunting grounds. Even the show Supernatural did an episode about him in season 3, episode 2, called Time Is on My Side. In that episode, Sam and Dean, the main characters who hunt monsters, discover a doctor who, back in 1816, became obsessed with finding the secret to eternal life by taking people's organs and body parts and giving himself his own little upgrade with them. While the tale is quite well known, the truth of it all still remains a mystery, entwined in speculation. We decided to share some of the stories that have been posted about the doc and let you decide what you really think happened. So before we get into the stories, Alex, you were the one who mentioned Doc Benton to me. What brought that up? How did it pop up in your mind?
Well, it didn't pop up in my mind. It was actually a book that I was reading about New England legends. I was reading a book about it to our son probably a couple weeks ago. We were just sitting outside on the porch, and we ended up reading this entire book. I read the whole book to him while we were just sitting in the rocking chairs.
Yes.
Yeah, because we had a power outage here where we live. There was a power outage, middle of the day. Nice, beautiful day out. We said, hey, let's go outside. Let's read a book. So that's what I did. Went out and I read him a book, and Doc Benton was one of the stories in there. And I talked to you about it, and then we realized that we had seen him or seen that episode of Supernatural recently. Mm-hmm. And it was like, oh, yeah, that's right. Okay. So they took that real life legend or story and turned it into a television episode or a character in a television mm-hmm. episode, which was pretty cool. So,
and when we had talked about it and discussed the legend, it's very interesting because it's so close to us. And
it is. It's like, what, not even an hour away from here.
No, it's pretty close to us. And it's one of those things where I remember hearing about it, but I forgot. And it's funny how, like, when you have these legends and these stories that are, like, in your area, how easy it is to just forget about them until something brings it up.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're not thinking about it or talking about it or whatever, yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to read the first story?
Sure. Let's get into the first story here. This story comes from an excerpt from an essay by Tim Weed called On the Trails of Legend. It goes on to say about the story of Doc Benton that there is a 19th century legend about a doctor from the nearby town of Benton, a gaunt and eccentric man who had completed his medical studies abroad and was rumored to be an alchemist. This was all well and good until the town's household pets began to disappear. Fodder, it was rumored, for the doctor's nefarious experiments. When the first child went missing, a hue and cry arose in the village, and the doctor fled in the direction of Moosilauke. Near the summit, he was observed to quaff a mysterious elixir and disappear. Shortly afterwards, in 1860, the Moosilauke Summit House was built, and in the environs of this structure, a furtive spirit was often detected, creaking across the floor late at night, leaving windows open and snacking on food from the cupboards. Some witnesses swore they saw a black cloaked shadow darting in and out of the cairns, marking the trail on the ridge below the windswept summit cone. Dartmouth Outing Club crews staffed the summit house until it burned to its foundation in the fall of 1942. We picked our way across the rocky ruins of this structure in order to reach the plaque marking the highest point on the mountain. We saw no ghost, but as the snowshoers had warned, we encountered low visibility and high winds. So there's a little bit of an excerpt of what this gentleman had heard about Doc Benton.
And he did not see a ghost.
He did not.
The next story of the old Doc comes from newenglandfolklore.blogspot.com. Thomas Benton was born in the early 1800s in a town near Hanover, New Hampshire. The son of a prominent family, Tom was sent to the University of Heidelberg, Germany, to attend medical school. Although Tom excelled as a student, he felt like an outsider among the Germans and formed a close relationship only with one elderly professor. Although he was kindly, there was something strange about the professor. The other faculty members shunned him, and the students whispered about blasphemous experimentation. But he took Tom under his wing, and the two spent many nights discussing medicine, science, and theology. When the old professor died, he left Tom some arcane books and a small locked chest, which Tom brought back to New Hampshire after his graduation. Tom quickly became the most respected doctor in New Hampshire and could heal any patient who came to him. But in 1816, he learned the limits of his medical skills. His beautiful fiancée, the daughter of a wealthy landowner, came down with typhoid fever. Tom was unable to cure her, and she died in his arms. The shock was more than he could take. Tom abandoned his home and medical practice and retreated to a ramshackle cabin on Mount Moosilauke. The only possessions he brought with him were the books and the small locked chest given to him by his mentor in Heidelberg. You see, the old professor had been working on the secret of eternal life. Tom's fiancée may have died, but Tom was determined to defeat death itself. And they put in parentheses, insert your best demented laugh here. Do you want to try?
That's a bit forced.
I was forcing it.
Yes.
Weird things began to occur around the mountain. Farm animals were found dead, their corpses unmarked except for a single small wound left behind their ears. The body of a young man was stolen from the undertaker, only to be discovered on Mount Moosilauke with a small wound behind its ear. Although the locals pitied Tom for his broken heart, they didn't support livestock killing and grave robbing. Groups of officials trekked up the mountain to confront Tom, but when they reached his cabin, it was empty. Tom had run off into the woods, driven mad by grief and his experimentation. He had discovered the secret to eternal life, but at the cost of his sanity. Okay, time for a quiz. If you were an immortal madman, which of the following would you do? A, throw kidnapped children into ravines. B, push hikers off cliffs. C, terrorize, drive insane, and then murder loggers. D, burn down hotels. E, frighten Dartmouth students. F, all of the above. The answer, at least in Dr. Benton's case, is F, all of the above. Since he is immortal, Dr. Benton has had plenty of time to commit evil acts, which I've only been able to briefly summarize. A full recitation of the legend can take several hours and is best heard late at night on the slopes of Mount Moosilauke from a member of the Dartmouth Outing Club. I suspect that Dr. Benton sometimes appears to those tired, frightened freshmen, but you may be able to catch a glimpse of him even if you don't go to Dartmouth. Just climb Mount Moosilauke and look for a man with long white hair and a black cape. He shouldn't be hard to miss, but just be sure you see him before he sees you, and don't get close to the edge of any cliffs. That was a fun little article.
Yeah, that's a good one. Definitely a good one. And it makes you wonder too, like, did this guy, did he discover the secret of immortality? And is it just replacing your body parts? Like, was he the first organ donor? And like, what does he have to replace? Like the show Supernatural, he was replacing like his liver, heart, all those kind of things.
Like,
right?
even like his eye.
But then like his eye and stuff like that. So it's like, what's the lifespan of like of organic life matter like for a human? You know what I mean? Like, it makes me wonder, like, would you have to replace your brain? And if you replace the brain, how the hell do you replace the brain by yourself? How would you do that? You know what I mean? Like, how would you possibly replace your own brain? How are you going to do an operation on yourself?
Literally like Dr. Frankensteining yourself.
Yeah. And if not the brain, like, can the brain last as long as it's in the correct environment of its host? Like, you know, I don't know. It's just very interesting and kind of fun to think about. Like,
and then
could this be done?
Then there's the whole debate of, if you got a brain transplant, would you have your memories? You'd have the memories of the person in that brain. Like
the consciousness, like,
yes,
where does your consciousness go? How does that work? You know? Yeah, there's a lot of questions there that are kind of fun to think about.
But nobody actually wants to try it.
No, I mean, come on, please. That's why it's a story and a legend. Well, this next story comes from another Dartmouth student sharing the tale he heard about the doc. The Legend of Doc Benton. There's this kid who grew up in Warren, New Hampshire. He was an extremely smart child and would hike over to Mount Moosilauke and go to a different school and eventually to Germany for medical school. Doc Benton finished his studies and was very involved with studying the idea of eternal life. He returned to Warren and became the town doctor, but a pandemic killed a significant portion of the town, including his wife and kids. So in this one, he's got kids. Following, he receded from the town and hid in his shack in the woods. He was rarely seen by the town and only returned for supplies when necessary and basically became the town ghost. He developed a reputation as a strange and mysterious old woodsman in the area. One Halloween, a group of boys decided to visit Doc Benton's house. It was a cold and foggy night. They approached the house to find bright lights coming from all the windows. They approached a window but could barely see anything because of the dense fog. Doc Benton noticed the adventurous boys and stared at them as they ran back to town. The following winter was brutally cold and had a terrible amount of snowfall. Animals had been randomly dying throughout the town and were found with a white scratch behind their ear. The town was freaked out by the brutal winter and odd number of animals dying with strange signs. Later in the winter, a schoolgirl named Mary disappeared from her backyard, and her mother noticed footprints leading into the woods, which made it seem like she was dragged out by an adult. The mother panics and rounds up the entire town to search for her. The town follows the footsteps, which led to a boxed canyon at the top of Mount Moosilauke. There would be nowhere for the kidnapper to go since there are steep cliffs at either side. However, when they got to the end of the canyon and did not find Mary, they looked up and saw Doc Benton climbing up the cliff with Mary on his shoulder, and when he got to the top of the cliff, he threw her off. Mary is then found dead at the bottom of the cliff, and there's a white scratch behind her ear and a red dot on her head. There have been other stories throughout the years from caretakers at Moosilauke and other people in the area that claim that they have seen Doc Benton wandering the woods and haunting local townspeople and hikers.
So I want to jump in.
Please.
And say that this story was online. It's posted by a Dartmouth student. We had to keep editing this. I wanted the story because of what it was about, the information given, but the writing was so bad. And this is a Dartmouth student.
We'll put links in the show notes.
Oh my gosh, go
this.
read it, because we had to change how the wording was because it didn't
just
make
to make
sense.
it to have it make sense.
Typos. Dude, you went to Dartmouth? Proofread that stuff. Come on.
Yes.
Yes, that was a difficult read. I apologize.
That's okay. That's okay.
We'll move on to the next one. This is a quick but detailed version coming from raunerlibrary.blogspot.com. There are numerous evolving traditions that surround the first-year trips that are taking place this month at Dartmouth, many of them documented in records of the Outing Club, housed here in Rauner. One is the storytelling tradition, specifically the story of Doc Benton. The Benton tale was told during late-night gatherings of the first years at Moosilauke Ravine Lodge. This oral tradition has been taking place since freshman trips were first offered back in the 1930s, and the Benton story is still told at the lodge, although no longer at every first-year gathering. The story goes that Thomas Benton was born in the mid-1700s in Benton, New Hampshire, a small hamlet located near the base of Mount Moosilauke. After receiving his medical education at the University of Heidelberg, Benton practiced for some years in London and Boston, but returned to Benton to set up his own medical practice. It was following his return to Benton that the terrifying legend begins. Each telling of the story brings variations, modifications, and interpretations provided by the individual narrator. In deference to the tradition of storytelling, further details will not be revealed here. However, suffice it to say, the legend of Doc Benton is seared forever into the minds of generations of Dartmouth first years, especially those who have spent time on and in proximity of Mount Moosilauke. So I want to point out something interesting is this story is saying he was born in Benton, New Hampshire.
That's the story that I heard as well.
Mm-hmm. So, and it's like his name's Benton. So if he was from Benton, and there's some versions where his family's of prominence, could it be that Doc Benton, like his family were like the founders of Benton?
The town was named after another Thomas Benton, but it was a different Thomas Benton.
Was it like a congressman?
He was a congressman from a totally different state.
Okay.
Yes.
Because there was a congressman, I believe, Thomas Benton. I thought I read.
Yes, and that was from a completely different state. So the fact that he was born there and that was his name and that he was named, basically had the same name as the person that the town was named after, was all a big coincidence.
It's interesting, though.
It is interesting. But yes, that's the story that I heard, and the version that I heard. I like this. This is a very brief little thing from the Rauner Library. The Rauner Library, apparently, if you go there to the library and ask to see the file on Thomas Benton, it's apparently very thick. It's like a thick file that they have, and they've collected all kinds of eyewitness accounts, stories, newspaper clippings, anything you could imagine related to the Thomas Benton story from the local people there. So it's pretty interesting. I'd love to actually make a trip up there and ask to see the file. But it's one of those things where you have to look at it there. Like they don't let you leave with it, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
All right, next we are going to read this version from the morbidlibrary.com, and this one goes into much more detail. So let's see if they can maybe clear up or provide a little more insight into what's going on with old Doc Benton. There are many iterations of this legend, as it is historically told as a campfire story to scare people. Thus, details were added and exaggerated over time to make the tale more terrifying. We will cover the basic and consistent points of the story here. Doc Benton was born as Thomas Benton sometime in the 1800s, according to most variations of the legend, though some iterations have him being born as early as the 1700s. He was born in a village in New Hampshire, USA. He was always a smart young man, but his family did not have the means to educate him throughout his life. Eventually, the town needed a doctor and thought Benton had the potential to fill the role, so they essentially crowdfunded his education and sent him to Germany to attend medical school. While studying, a man named Professor Stockmeyer took Benton under his wing. There, they studied esoteric subjects such as alchemy and immortality alongside the usual studies. Stockmeyer unfortunately died right before Benton graduated and returned to New Hampshire. Once again isolated, curious, and lacking intellectual stimulation, Benton situated his home out in the woods. Some say this was to hide his experiments and studies from the villagers, but others say he just valued his privacy. In all accounts, Benton was a competent doctor and had a good reputation among the village. But all that changed one night when something bad happened to Doc Benton. I know that sounds vague, but this event changes between tellings. Some options include a family member dying, having his romantic advances rejected, or some sort of mental break. Take your pick. After suffering from this tragedy, he went into his home and refused to leave or see anyone. He began, or intensified, his gruesome experiments in the secluded cabin. The village began experiencing a rash of animal mutilations and deaths, all being found days later with a mark behind the left ear. Soon, the strange phenomena escalated to a corpse being taken from the town undertaker. Bodies were found hidden in the town with the same mark. The villagers hoped that Doc Benton, the local intellectual, knew something or could offer some help with the terrifying goings-on. So they went to his cabin. But the cabin had been left to the elements, showing no signs of recent habitation. A search party set out to locate Doc Benton, but he was never found. Throughout the following months, a handful of people claimed to see a tall man with long white hair wrapped in a cloak. He was often sighted in the woods, dark cloak skulking between tree trunks. Most researchers traced the tale of Doc Benton to the 1920s when the Dartmouth County Outing Club began recounting a chilling tale to their newest and youngest members. From there, the tale spread to other hikers and outdoorsmen, evolving with each telling like a sinister game of telephone. Some claim Doc Benton died in the woods. Some say that he continues to hunt animals and humans that stray within his domain, with many claiming to see dark clothing moving through the woods or to feel a hand touch them when no one was with them. This led to rumors of his involvement with local crimes. In 1860, a logger was found murdered with a strange injury behind his ear, and around the turn of the century, another man was found with the same mark. Many attributed these deaths to Doc Benton himself. Notably, there was one man who seemingly survived an encounter with Doc Benton. At least so the legend goes. In the 1970s, a man went hiking near the Jobbledunk Ravine. When he did not return in a timely manner, a search party was dispatched to search for him. Despite the remoteness of his destination and the rough terrain, the man was found. The man was banged up with scrapes and bruises, but he was ultimately fine. However, the tale he had to tell was hair-raising. The hiker claimed that he was pushed while climbing a ledge, that he felt a hand touch him. The encounter was quickly attributed to the malevolent Doc Benton. Unfortunately, the hiker's name is not shared in the retellings of his encounter, so it's pretty tough to fact-check. Take the tale with a grain of salt. This legend seems to have been born of a few phenomena, namely a fear of the unnatural, and it's also a cautionary tale. On the fear of the unnatural side of things, there's this idea that immortality is inherently inhuman, that a human with no expiration date, so to speak, is not limited to the same constraints as someone with one. It also tends to lean towards mocking religion to many believers. In their tradition, only Christ is immortal, and anything trying to achieve that is blasphemous. Of course, this is just an interpretation. Everyone has their own interpretation of the Bible. As for the cautionary tale, it's a warning told around campfires to prevent people from traipsing through the wilderness on their own. Even if the murders and missing persons were not originally linked to the legend, the act of adding that connective tissue inherently implies that Doc Benton seeks out those who enter the woods on their own. Being alone always makes you vulnerable, especially when the terrain is rough and predators abound.
So I have a few thoughts on Doc Benton. And my main thought is I can't help but think it's just made up by Dartmouth students. And the reason I say that is because there are so many versions and inconsistencies. There's no way of actually finding out if this person existed, if this person went to medical school.
Wait. Let me read one more story.
Okay, we're going to do one more story.
Okay, so this one is from the book that I was telling you about before. I figured we heard all these different tales. We got all these different details and everything. This, to me, is the best version of this. So the book is called The Ghostly Tales of New England by Carrie Jutner. The Mad Doctor of Mount Moosilauke. For centuries, people have been searching for the secret of eternal youth. Some say a doctor in the White Mountains may have found it. Thomas Benton was born in the early 1800s. He studied medicine in Germany, then moved back to New Hampshire to become the first and only doctor in his town at the base of the White Mountains. Coincidentally, the town where he lived was called Benton. It wasn't named for the young doctor, though. It was named for a Missouri senator with the same name, Thomas Hart Benton. Dr. Benton didn't just want to heal people, he wanted to find a way to keep them young forever. In his spare time, he did mysterious experiments, trying to create an elixir of youth. But playing with nature is a dangerous game, and Benton's ambition may have led to his later misfortunes. Young Dr. Benton fell in love, but tragedy struck. Before the wedding, his bride-to-be got very sick and died. This drove the young doctor mad. He disappeared from the community, locking himself away in a cabin he built at the top of Mount Moosilauke. That's when strange things began to happen. First, farm animals started dying, but no one could determine the cause of death. The only sign of injury was a strange red swelling with a white pinprick on the animal's left ear. No one could explain it. No predator was known to leave such a mark. The farmers wondered if the mad doctor was doing experiments on their livestock and decided to visit his cabin. When they arrived, they found strange equipment and signs of weird experiments, but no doctor. The man was nowhere to be seen. What sorts of experiments was the mad doctor doing? What was the apparatus they found? We'll never know for sure. All we can be certain of is that the state of the doctor's cabin unnerved the men who explored it. On the way back down the mountain, one farmer got separated from the group. His friends continued walking, assuming he'd catch up. He never did. Later, he was found dead, with a red swelling and a white pinprick behind his left ear. Cattle continued to die with no explanation. The local farmers were getting more and more anxious. Then, an even more monstrous mystery occurred. In nearby towns, babies began disappearing from their beds during the night. Now the villagers were truly frightened. Then, one day, a woman was working in her yard with her daughter when a man with long white hair wearing a black cloak swooped out of the woods. He grabbed the young girl and carried her away as she screamed. The girl's father and a group of other men quickly chased the kidnapper, tracking his footprints to a high cliff. There, they found Dr. Benton, holding his captive at the edge of the rock face. "Release her!" the girl's father shouted. Then the men watched in horror as the doctor did as they asked. He released the young girl, sending her tumbling to her death over the side of the mountain. The doctor was never seen again, but mysterious events kept occurring in the White Mountains. In 1860, 30 years after Dr. Benton was last seen, a hotel was built at the top of Mount Musalak. When a cable that helped hold the building in place was cut, a logger offered to climb up and fix it. He never returned. Later, he was found dead with, you guessed it, a red swelling and a white pinprick behind his left ear. To this day, people often report seeing a dark, cloaked form roaming through the woods atop Mount Musalak at night. But the question remains, did the mad doctor discover the secret of eternal youth after all? Is he still alive and well somewhere? Or did his experiments go wrong, turning him into a creature that will haunt the White Mountains forever? I love that story.
So that one explains the town of Benton, New Hampshire, and how it got its name, which is all well and good. But I feel like that's the only thing we can actually look up and find out if it's real or not.
Yeah, everything else, exactly, like you said. And I don't know, that's the stories that you had compiled and that we read here earlier. That was the first that I'd heard that he was into some weird stuff when he was studying in Germany. Like, I never heard that iteration of the story till just now, today.
And what is the timeline here between Doc Benton being a doctor and then, running to the woods and then these alleged experimentations? Because they say, oh, a man with long white hair. Okay, so it makes it sound like he's an older man. But a lot of the stories that were read make it sound like he ran off when he was younger. He came back from medical school, helped people for maybe a few years, or if he had a fiance or a wife and young daughter. These stories make it sound like he's relatively young, probably younger than 40. Could a 40-year-old have white hair? It's possible. But it makes it sound like an old man is haunting the area.
Well, but it seems like the long white hair and everything happens after the doctor hasn't been seen for a long time. Okay. So they're just assuming that it's him. So, I mean, you figure if somebody becomes a recluse, you're going to look pretty different to people. If you're a recluse and you're just coming into town, like some stories say he came into town for supplies here and there, became the town ghost, whatever. I mean, if he started growing his hair out,
I'm asking, what is the
haircuts.
timeline to get white hair if he was relatively younger coming back? Because some of these stories
who
made
knows?
it sound like he wasn't working very long as a doctor. So that's why there's just these weird kind of the variations also bring a lot of inconsistencies to mind. So for me, I think it was made up by Dartmouth students to scare them, or by whoever to scare students. And I also think that with this story of Doc Benton, there have been so many hikers who go up Mount Musalak. There are skiers, there are all these people, and yet why hasn't anyone else really had an encounter? Why are there no victims named? Why are there no dates of when these victims, like all these things allegedly happened? And that, to me, is the telling of a made-up story. When there is nothing that you can pinpoint except maybe a location where somebody said, oh, it's Benton, and you can say Benton was named after, this person. Okay, anyone can look that up and say that. There's also Hanover. There's, all these different towns. So even the location varies, making it very difficult to try to determine where he was born and when he was born. I could go ask, hey, town of Benton from the 1700s to, mid 1800s or 1900s, did you have anyone Thomas Benton born? But it's such a broad range. They'd probably laugh at me if I went for records like that.
Well, I think the Ronner Library has, like I said, that thick file that you can go and ask to see. So I wonder if in there it's
you think the article would have said we have proof that he was actually alive? We have a date of birth? No, there's information about the stories and maybe things that had happened, like animal disappearances or
that's the thing.
It's
anything related to the story. So anything that maybe could be interpreted as relating to the story, that may be the missing children, missing the animal mutilations, missing animals, missing babies, whatever it is, those stories could be in there, and it could be perhaps in the story would like say, for example, it's a story from the mid 1800s, a newspaper clipping or something. Will it say in the newspaper clipping about a disappearing child? It's rumored or it's speculated that Doc Benton is in the woods and
but
kidnapped
does it
her.
say that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, is that why it's put into the file, or is it just they're taking
stories.
anything possible that could possibly fit into this and just toss it in to make it look even more like, oh.
I just think if anyone had any proof that this person was alive, it would be somewhere. Somebody would have said, hey, I wanted to know, I did the research, here it is. The library could have said, hey, we looked it up,
That's if they care enough to do that,
but
though.
if they're writing an article about it.
The article, the thing that I was telling you about, it was actually that particular website. You have to, I'm trying to remember, I think you have to be a student there to access all the information, or you could go into the library to see the file. So they don't tell you because they want you to be either a student or they want you to go in person to check out the file.
I get that, but if they're going to write an article, all they can do is say,
it wasn't an article. It was literally like a paragraph. It wasn't even an article.
No, I had an article from that library
I
read.
Oh, okay.
So
you're
if they
right.
posted something online, they could have at least said, and we have documentation he existed. Come to the library to check it out or something, but they didn't.
They could, but they didn't.
They didn't. So to me, I think he is made up, which is, in a way, because I think like, oh, I wonder what the pinprick is. Maybe he's like trying to make an elixir for like immortality and he's trying it on animals, but it's really killing them, or he's trying to reanimate corpses with it and it's not working. My mind goes in all these thoughts, but it doesn't matter because I don't think he really ever existed.
It's a fun story.
It is, though.
And you know what? Even if he did exist, he's long gone by now, I'm sure. I'm sure he did not find the secret to eternal life. I'm sure that the doctor in Germany or whatever didn't find the secret to eternal life.
Well, that dude allegedly died.
That dude died. Oh, yeah, that dude died. That's right.
He failed at that mission.
And he gave all his stuff to Benton. So, okay. You're right.
And then I think, what if there really was a Thomas Benton who was a doctor and was like a super nice guy, and then all of a sudden his name gets taken and twisted into like these horror stories?
Well, he's not around to care, so it's pretty. It's a fun story. If nothing else, it's a fun story, and it's one that I'm sure they're still telling at Dartmouth, even though they're not teaching English very well to some of their students.
That blows my mind. Isn't Dartmouth supposed to be like one of these like prestigious colleges? I thought it was a
prestigious college. I could be wrong.
The people can't even write a proper sentence structure.
Yeah.
I think that student spent way too much time partying. I just think Andy Bernard.
From Yale? Didn't he go to Yale?
No.
Wait, where did he go?
Big Red.
Why am I blanking right now? Oh my gosh. Where did he go? Princeton?
No.
Where did Andy Bernard? We're talking about The Office, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh my God.
I can't believe
you're
I'm
having
an
Andy Bernard moment. Like the Kit Kat, give me a break.
I can't believe
I'm
off
a piece of that fancy feast.
Yeah, what was the school? Why am I forgetting this? I'm serious. Wait, there's Yale, Princeton. It wasn't Harvard.
No.
What was the other one? What's the other big school?
Where anyone who goes to it is like, I want to.
Why can't I'm sorry, I'm blanking. I thought it was Yale. No, it's not Yale. Where'd he go? Where'd he go to school? Just tell me where it was, please. Now this is going to drive me nuts. And we're leaving. I'm not editing this out. We're leaving this into the podcast.
I'm laughing because I can't even remember it. I'm having
you seriously can't remember either? Are you serious?
I'm blanking on it. I'm totally blanking, and I was giving you shit for it.
Where did he go to school?
And I know it because I work with somebody who went there. He was a doctor, and he's like, I went to like it was just, that's why I think Andy Bernard's character, as he does that, is so funny.
Oh, what's his name? I mean, what's the name of the college? Can you look it up?
I am.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe we're doing this.
Because I'm totally blanking. I know.
You're gonna
Cornell.
Cornell. Jeez, my gosh, can't believe I. Yeah, okay, Cornell.
Sorry.
You ever heard of it?
I went to Cornell. I knew everything else. I'm blanking on. We
my
both
goodness.
just had a blank moment
completely
of, oh my gosh.
Completely forgot about
goodness.
that.
And
Wow.
I'm laughing at you like a jerk, hoping you'll get it.
Well, I'm waiting for you to tell me, but you didn't know all along. Great.
Either.
Thanks a lot. You just got exposed for being a jerk.
At least I admit. I could have been on my phone on the sly looking it up, but I was I'm going to admit that if he didn't get it, I'll admit I didn't either. But that's the thing where it makes me think this but Andy Bernard's character in The Office talks about how he partied a lot, and he always makes up stories that contradict each other about going to Cornell. Yes. But that person who wrote that article from Dartmouth just made me think you are the Dartmouth version of Andrew Bernard.
Speaking of Dartmouth, one of my first ever wrestling shows that I did was at Dartmouth College. For some reason, they had wrestling there.
Really?
They had a wrestling
How did that
show
go?
there. I wrestled. I remember I went there. The opening match was myself and Big Rick Fuller. And
Big Rick Fuller is awesome.
Yes. And
I miss him.
We went 25 minutes, I think, and we were supposed to go originally 5 minutes, but the rest of the show hadn't shown up yet. We were the only two that had gotten there.
Oh, no.
So we had to put in some time, as they say in wrestling. So we were just kind of out there. I was brand new. I was maybe, 3-4 months in the business, and I had no clue. I was just I'll do whatever you say, Rick. I'll listen to you out there. Yep. So that was my Dartmouth story.
Interesting.
My wrestling tie-in there. Yes. So, well, that was Doc Benton. So yeah, do your own research, and we'll provide some links so you can look those up.
Can you prove me wrong?
What?
No, I mean the listeners. Prove me wrong. Show me proof he existed.
I mean, we looked. I looked at a bunch of different stuff. You looked at a bunch of different stuff, and yeah, I mean, I couldn't find anything. And
I'm pretty good at researching. When I want to dig, I usually find stuff.
You dig. You do a pretty good job, I got to say. But it could also be because, again, his date of birth ranges from the 1700s to the 1800s.
I went into the rabbit hole of Thomas Hart Benton. Trying to find out
the senator.
Yeah,
really, to
see because he married. Because I thought I read he married somebody from New Hampshire or something, and I was oh, okay, was it his son? And then it wasn't that. And I was trying to find a way to figure out, did this person really exist? I couldn't, but maybe you can.
And if you do, let us know.
Please.
For sure. All right. Well, until next time, I am the Golden Greek, Alex Arion, joined as always by my beautiful, lovely, gorgeous wife, Monique.
And you've been listening to the Homewrecker Podcast. Want to try that again?
What the fuck?